Hi. So I was talking to a young man named Zach the other day. We went out to lunch, and he told me he had taken the online money magic class about 2 years ago, 2.5, and he told me that there was a metaphor that I used in that class around money that had completely transformed his orientation to money, his experience of money. This is years later. He said, I still think about that. It's so profoundly different for me. So I'm Michelle Masters. I'm an NLP trainer. I've been an NLP trainer and practitioner for 20 years. And one of the questions I get a lot is, what is NLP? Neuro-linguistic programming. So I can start to explain, well, NLP is a series of tools and change patterns and techniques to revise unconscious patterning and communicate better. I can just watch their eyes glaze over. Or I can use a metaphor. I can say, well, NLP is kind of like rewriting software. If you've got software that's running that you're not happy with, yelling at your computer does not help. Trying to force it to be different, using all your will, all your skill, doesn't help. What helps is if you rewrite the software. Once you rewrite software, then you get a different result without having to try, without having to exert effort, without having to try to be different. This is what NLP does. It rewrites mental software. When I say that, I can see a light bulb go off for people. I can see, oh, so this could be different, and I don't have to really defeat myself. I don't have to use a lot of effort. That's the power of a metaphor. I've also been a family constellation facilitator for about 18 years, and I have the same thing. People can say, so what are family constellations? And I can spend a whole lot of time explaining, well, we have our desire to belong is so strong. We have these unconscious loyalties. We don't like to have it better than the people, blah, 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 blah. I can watch people struggle to stay with me and understand. Or I can say, let's imagine for a moment, you're really hungry. You're sitting at a table, a long table. In front of you is your favorite food. You're so psyched about it. But next to you, on either end, stretching as far away as you can see, all the other members of your family. And all of them have either pushed their food away or have no food. They've pushed it away, or they won't eat, or they don't have it. So there you are, hungry. Imagine how far does that first forkful of food get up to your mouth before it just feels too weird. It feels too weird to be eating and enjoying it when everybody else has pushed their plate away. So that's an experience most people can have. They can understand, yeah, that would feel odd. Nobody, if they won the lottery and they found out at a funeral, would start dancing around. It just feels too weird. So those are metaphors that communicate in a way people can actually feel and understand. Again, this is why metaphors are so useful. I had a client once who came to see me because she was doing okay in her business, but she really wanted to take her business to the next level. Now, she had cut herself off from her family, and with good reason. It was understandable why she did this. But it became very obvious that the thing that was in the way of her having the really big business she wanted was this attitude of disconnection and resentment that she had towards her family. And so I tried to explain that for a while, and she was having none of it. So I finally said, because she said, I'm strong enough, I'm doing this on my own, I'm so strong. So I said, okay, I understand. And I did. I said, but let's imagine for a moment a giant sequoia tree, a huge giant sequoia tree, magnificent. But let's imagine it has no roots whatsoever. Now, introduce just a little bit of wind, and what happens? She said, oh. And so rather than having to explain or argue, that simple metaphor helped me to communicate what was the limitation in what she was doing. A little while later, about a half hour later, she said, but don't you think? I said, I know, but she's like, all right. Metaphors communicate so profoundly and so succinctly. Those are just simple metaphors. Sometimes metaphors are longer. They come in story form. When I teach, I often tell stories I've heard. And every story I tell, I heard once. Sometimes 20 years, sometimes 30 years or more before. Even though I heard it once, it stayed with me. And I tell these stories, and I'll often have my students come up to me later, remember that story you told? Because it stayed with them. Stories are processed differently than information. They stay. Stories work. So this is part of an even bigger category of metaphors called storytelling. Whether it's simple metaphors or longer stories, stories are fantastic communication devices. I was teaching a class in metaphors recently, and I was doing a demo with a student. And it was clear that what had gotten him stuck from having what he wanted was this experience that had happened while he was in the womb. He's a very dear man, and something happened that caused him to start to deny his own worth out of both love and loyalty to his mother. Now, this reminded me of a story one of my students had told in a metaphor class one day, a story they had created, which was similar. And so I started to tell him in the course of this change work, as I was doing the other work, I started to tell him this story. It was very profound. He started to cry. I started to cry. Half the class was choking back sobs. I could hear sniffles and sobs because it reached us on a very profound emotional level. It had a big impact. This is what stories do better than anything. Stories and metaphors are our most profound method of communication, far more profound than facts and information. Did you know that facts are processed by a very small part of our brain and that resonate with a very, very small portion of our identity? But stories and metaphors, they are processed by the whole brain. They stay with us. They speak to all the different ages and identities that we have walking around. So imagine that you were giving a public lecture to a big audience that you were really wanting to help, but you were speaking in a language that only 5% of the audience could hear. That's what happens when you speak, when you share information, when you share facts. But if you tell a story, if you use a metaphor, 95% of your audience can hear you. I mean 100%, not just 5, the other 95% as well. Everyone in the audience can hear. That's a language everyone understands. So it increases your ability to communicate to not just to a number of people, but to the amount of each person that you're talking to. Instead of talking to a little part of them, you're talking to all of them. Everyone's included. So learning to use metaphors more and using them more profoundly and purposefully increases our potency in our communication to an astonishing degree. Throughout history, the greatest teachers have always used stories and metaphors and parables to teach. And there's a reason for that. They last, they work, they communicate throughout the whole person and across time. So, for anyone who's a coach or a healing practitioner, you can become an even greater avenue of change for your clients. And frankly, it's just plain fun to do. It's just plain fun. So if you'd like to be able to communicate to everyone in the audience, not just that 5%, to all of your clients and all of their identities, we'd love to have you join us and learn how to make this powerful tool work for you and your clients. So we'd love to have you come join us for Metaphors for Change. Thank you.